I was planning to have a more general conversation with you about Keir Starmer's kind of activities since last week and his announcement this morning on transport, and how it makes you feel about him and them and the government and Labour, as opposed to Reform, who are always also out and about after the announcement of some of their major frontbench jobs. But then Robert Jenrick got very specific about child poverty, specifically the 2-child limit on universal credit. The change that the government recently brought in, or it will only become policy in April of this year, he said Reform, if they got into power, would undo. And I wonder what you make of that, because he was asked questions as well about the triple lock and an awful lot else besides. This is Robert Jenrick, who is the new economic spokesman for the Reform Party after defecting from the Conservatives. I was also struck by how often he said, "We will be Conservative." I thought, risky strategy. But anyway, Aggie Chambre is here to talk about it, LBC's deputy political editor. Talk us through more general stuff, and then we can zone in on the child benefit cap, the 2-child benefit cap.
So this was Robert Jenrick's first outing as the not-so-shadow chancellor, but Nigel Farage referred to it yesterday as his shadow cabinet. Of course it is not that. They are not the official opposition. In fact, far from it, but they see themselves now as the opposition to Labour, and that's how they're very much billing themselves. So this was his first opportunity, and indeed the 3 other people who were introduced yesterday in those top jobs, Richard Tice, Suella, Braverman, Zia Youssef, will all get these opportunities, these press conferences to lay out their policy platforms. And this was the turn on day one after that top team being announced of Robert Jenrick. And in this press conference, he chose to U-turn on a previous Reform UK policy, which was that they would keep what Labour had done and ditch the 2-child benefit cap. That, of course, hasn't come in yet. That's now not happening. So they would restore the 2017 George Osborne policy of the 2-child benefit cap in full. And we can just hear a little clip of Robert Jenrick announcing that now.
As a signal of intent today, Reform is changing our policy on the 2-child cap for universal credit. The policy was well-meaning. We want to help British working families to have more children. But right now, we just can't afford to do so with welfare. So it has to go. As Reform's Shadow Chancellor, I'm ending it. A Reform government will restore the cap in full. We are the party of alarm clock Britain. We are a party of workers and not welfare.
So last year, Shelagh, Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, had said that lifting the cap was not a silver bullet and suggested his party wanted to go much further to encourage people to have children. Following that, he'd said that the cap would only be lifted for working families. But I think people did look at that at the time and wonder whether that was Reform UK putting, and let's face it, effective pressure on the Labour Party, on the Labour government to lift that cap, which of course now they have done.
Although they did have a great deal of pressure from within their own.
They had a huge amount of pressure. But I'm sure it didn't help to have Nigel Farage, the Reform UK party, on the right, agreeing with your backbenchers, indeed. Although some people, I think, at the time said actually they didn't want to be in the same camp as Reform UK, so maybe they were a bit more unsure about it. But of course, the government has now said they're going to restore that from April. And there was a question from the Daily Mirror saying, if you restore the 2-child benefit limit, are you comfortable plunging hundreds of thousands of kids in poverty? And what is your plan to tackle 4.5 million children in poverty?
Well, it's not about that. Of course we care about ensuring that people can have kids and those kids can lead fulfilling lives. We can't just do that by spending more and more on benefits. The country is going to go bankrupt. That is the course we're currently on. So someone has to instill some realism into this debate. And that is what we're going to do. We're going to get the benefits bill down. We're going to do so fairly, with concern for the genuinely vulnerable. But we are going to get it down, because there's no alternative. And we're going to find other ways in which we can support families and working people, like building some more homes, for example, like getting some good jobs going again, like bringing down people's bills with a different energy policy. This is going to be our approach. But if you think that we can just keep going on like Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves is weekly, increasing the benefits bill, then you're on a course to bankruptcy, and Reform are not going to allow that to happen.
The Prime Minister has responded to Keir Starmer's called their pledge to reinstate the cap shameful. Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, has too responded on social media saying, how can anyone trust a word Reform say when they change their policies every 5 minutes? They said they would scrap the two-child benefit cap. Now they say they won't. But there also was a question about the triple lock, because previously it had sounded like Nigel Farage had said they would look at it. It was something they weren't sure about. But today, Robert Jenrick was asked about that, and he sounded much more sure.
Well, I think I was very clear on the triple lock that we're going to be saying more in time on that, but we're always going to protect pensioners. We're always going to protect pensioners because we want them to live in dignity and security. And we appreciate how life has been tough for them as a result of the bad policies of both the last Conservative government and this one. Energy prices, for example, those put immense strain on their budgets.
Shelagh, I also asked, because Richard Tice was on with our colleague Ben Kentish on Monday night, and it sounded like he had said that they would look at the minimum wage. So I asked Robert Jenrick to clarify comments about that, and he said, no, we're not cutting the minimum wage. We're absolutely not going to do that. Of course, this is sort of day 2 in the job, so you could maybe understand that some of the policies are changing, and it does seem like Reform UK increasingly do want to ditch some of the more expensive policies and look like they are a party that could potentially be in government. And indeed, Robert Jenrick, as you say, said a number of times that we will be conservative, and talked about, it always sounded like Rachel Reeves at points, talked about, they'll only cut tax when fiscal headroom allows, and will cut spending and reduce waste. They want a simpler tax system, and also talked about, in terms of benefits, I already mentioned, of course, the two-child benefit cap, but said that they want clinical diagnoses required for those who claim to have mental health disorders in order to receive disability benefits, and want to reintroduce in-person assessments for those on benefits.
The thing about what Keir Starmer has said on the two-child benefit cap and Jenrick's announcement of it today, I'll just read again what he said in his post on X. Shameful. As you said, he used that word about it. I'm incredibly proud that this government has scrapped the cruel two-child limit. Reform wants to push hundreds of thousands of children into poverty. Now, we've been hearing a lot lately about how bad Keir Starmer appears to be at politics, the process of, the game of politics. The truth is, he suspended 7 of his own MPs for voting for exactly that, to keep it rather than get rid of it. And they were suspended for that. And eventually he caught up with them. But they were suspended. They lost the whip for 6 months, I think it was, wasn't it, for that?
Some of them still haven't got it back, actually.
Some of them still haven't got it back. It's going to be so easy for people like Robert Jenrick and Nigel Farage to attack him on that, isn't it?
It is difficult. I mean, they feel that they have now got space to talk about how good it is that they have done this, that they've got rid of the two-child benefit cap. But as you rightly pointed out, they got rid of the two-child benefit cap after so much pressure from their backbenchers. And it increasingly...
If it's shameful, he should have seen on day 1 that it was shameful.
If it was shameful, maybe it should have been in their manifesto, but it wasn't in their manifesto. It was something that they felt they had to do because of that increasing pressure, yes, from their own party, but indeed from parties like Reform UK too. And I think that does put them in a slightly more difficult position. But of course, I mean, what Keir Starmer would say about suspending those MPs was that it was because it was a Scottish National Party amendment, and that was the reason. But they would also say they have now done this, at least it is coming in April, but they have now announced this. So they feel that they are able to talk about it as one of their great achievements, and they have spent a huge amount of money on it. So they want to talk about having done that.
But for all the parties, and perhaps especially for the party in government, the whole question of the welfare state and the welfare bill isn't going to go away. And it's multi-headed, isn't it? It's a multi-headed monster.
It's something all parties know they desperately need to get a grip on. And it's not entirely clear how this Labour government is going to do this yet. They have, of course, Alan Milburn, who used to be Health Secretary, looking into it. They have Pat McFadden, who's the Department for Work and Pension Secretary, looking into it too. And Labour MPs, you don't really speak to Labour MPs who don't admit that they need to do something about it. Often the same Labour MPs who were the ones protesting and threatening to rebel in last year's welfare vote, which of course eventually was pretty much ditched. Something got through, but it wasn't something which changed the system or saved much money. And so they're in this difficult sort of stasis over welfare. And indeed, I was speaking to someone, a government source the other day, who basically said they think that since actually that failed welfare vote, the entire government has been in paralysis since that point. So the idea of them being able to take a crack at it again, I think is going to be so immeasurably difficult. But I think they all know they need to do it.
Thank you very much indeed, Aggie Chambre, LBC's deputy political editor, who was in that room where Robert Jenrick was speaking this morning. They say if they get into power, reform that is, say if they get into power, they will reinstate the two-child benefit cap. I'll give you some statistics on what the removal of that cap will achieve. It kicks in April as things stand. And he was cagey, to say the least, wasn't he, about looking at the triple lock on state pensions.